The entire ballroom went silent. Every eye was fixed on a single point of motion. General Thorne, the groom's father, a decorated 4-star general who now stood with a look of dawning, unmistakable awe. He leaned over to his son Michael, and I could just make out the hushed, urgent whisper. "Michael, that's Spectre." The analyst from the JSOC briefing. Michael's easy smile evaporated, replaced by pure shock. The general then turned, his posture ramrod straight, and began to walk. Not towards the bride, not towards his son, but towards me. He stopped directly in front of my seat at the maid of honor's table, clicked his heels together with a sound like a rifle shot, and rendered a perfect salute. His voice boomed with a respect I had never heard in my life. "Ma'am, the honor is ours." I saw my sister's face across the room, her smug smirk collapsing into a mask of horrified disbelief. 30 minutes earlier, that same smirk was firmly in place. My sister, Chloe, the family's golden child who wielded her charisma like a shield, was giving her wedding speech. She raised her champagne flute, her eyes glittering. And a special toast for my big sister and maid of honor, Eva. She gave me a smile that was all teeth, a practiced look of pity she'd perfected over 2 decades. "Thank you for taking a day off from your spreadsheets to be here." A few of her friends tittered. "We're all so proud you have such a stable, quiet little government job. It's important work, I'm sure." Her voice was drenched in saccharine sweetness, each word a carefully crafted barb meant to paint me as the boring, inconsequential one. It was the same tone she used when I won the state science fair, and she called it cute that I had hobbies. My parents, of course, chuckled indulgently, the familiar sound of their quiet approval of her cruelty. A familiar coldness settled in my stomach. This is just how it is, I thought to myself, the heavy, tired weight of a truth being confirmed. I glanced across the room, and my eyes met those of her new father-in-law. General Thorne wasn't laughing. He was watching me with a neutral, intensely analytical expression. Like a puzzle he was slowly piecing together. He saw something, or rather, he didn't see the boring little paper pusher my sister was so desperate for me to be. Chloe's laugh echoed through the hall, a familiar sound of casual dismissal I'd endured my entire life. She thought she was landing the final, perfect jab on her wedding day. What she didn't know was that she'd just belittled me in front of the one man on the planet, who had briefed the White House on the fallout from my last boring spreadsheet. To understand the salute that followed, you have to understand the war I was fighting on 2 fronts. To my family, I was Mouse. It was a nickname born from my quiet nature, my tendency to read in a corner during loud family gatherings. They meant it affectionately, I think, but it became a box they put me in, small, quiet, and easily overlooked. For years, I didn't correct them. I let them believe I was Eva, the shy girl with the boring government job. Because, in my other life, the one they could never imagine, I wasn't a mouse. I was a ghost. I remember it perfectly at Chloe's engagement party a year before the wedding. The entire event was an extension of her, loud, glittering, and meticulously curated for social media. She held court, flashing her new diamond ring, while talking about her brand partnerships and follower count. I stood by the fireplace, nursing a drink, when my father, Robert, a man who saw the world in simple, bold lines, clapped me on the shoulder. He saw Chloe's life as a success story he could understand. Mine was a series of question marks. I'd tried to tell them I had a mandatory extended work trip coming up, one I couldn't miss. "Another data entry conference, Eva?" He'd boomed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Just try to get some sun this time, kiddo. You're looking pale." The familiar dismissal washed over me. I didn't just see his laughing face. I saw the scholarship award ceremony he and my mother missed for Chloe's soccer tournament. I saw the 20 years of them asking Chloe about every detail of her day, then turning to me with a simple, "And you, Eva? Is everything good?" It was the heavy, tired weight of a truth being reconfirmed. I was the background character in their story. My work trip wasn't to a conference center in some forgettable city. It was to a sensitive, compartmented information facility, a SCIF, in a country I can't name. The world was the complete opposite of Chloe's party. No windows, no music. Just the constant low hum of servers and the sterile, recycled air. Here, I wasn't a mouse. I was Captain Eva Rostova, United States Air Force Intelligence. My call sign was Spectre. My job was to see the patterns no one else did, to connect the dots from scraps of information and build a picture that could keep people alive. The weight of that responsibility was physical, constant pressure behind my eyes. One night, the pressure was immense. We were in the final hours of a mission codenamed Operation Nightfall. A special operations team was deep in hostile territory, waiting for the green light to proceed. "Spectre, we have a degraded feed from the asset." The watch commander's voice was tense, cutting through the silence of the room. "The window for Operation Nightfall is closing. We need a go-no-go recommendation in the next 90 seconds. The call is yours." On my screen were streams of meaningless data, but to me, they were a language. I saw a ghost of a signal, a whisper of electronic chatter that didn't fit the pattern. It was a digital footprint where there should have been none. It was a trap. My fingers flew across the keyboard. "Negative, watch commander. I say again, this is a no-go. Abort the mission. My analysis shows a high probability of a coordinated ambush at the secondary rally point. Repeat, abort the mission." Silence descended on the room. Every second felt like an hour. My heart pounded in my chest. If I was wrong, good people would die because of a ghost in the machine. Then the commander's voice came back, devoid of emotion but laced with relief. "Copy that, Spectre. Mission aborted. Stand by." An hour later, satellite imagery confirmed it. The rally point was swarming with hostiles. The team leader's voice crackled over the encrypted comms later. "Whoever Spectre is, you buy the drinks when we get back. Good call." A quiet nod from my CO was all the praise I got, or needed. "You just saved Task Force Griffin, Captain." 2 days later, I was in my sterile, featureless quarters when a video call came through. It was my mother, Linda, a woman who believed family peace was more important than fairness. Her face was a mask of manufactured panic. "Eva, honey, thank goodness. Chloe is an absolute wreck on wedding invitations. The font color is apparently a brand-defining disaster. She says the calligrapher is ruining her entire vision." I just stared at her, my mind still replaying the data streams, the heart-stopping silence before the abort confirmation. I had just navigated a life-or-death decision for a dozen soldiers, and my mother was telling me about a font. "It's just a shame your job isn't more flexible, honey," she continued, oblivious. "She really needs you here." I felt a vast, unbridgeable chasm open up between us. They lived in a world of brunch and brand aesthetics, while I lived in a world of shadows and consequences. They didn't see me, not really. They saw the quiet, simple daughter they'd created in their minds, the one it was convenient to believe in. For years, I let them have their narrative. I wore the mouse nickname like a shield because my real work required anonymity. But at that wedding, surrounded by people who understood duty, I realized I was done letting them define me. I just had to wait for the system to do it for me. My decision wasn't a grand plan for revenge. It was much simpler and colder than that. It was a quiet choice to stop participating in my own erasure. The strategy wasn't a strategy at all. It was simply an adherence to protocol. Chloe and General Thorne's son were getting married at the prestigious Fort Myer Officers Club, a place where rules weren't suggested. Standard procedure for base access required all guests to be vetted. For the first time in my life, I decided not to round down the edges of my identity to make my family comfortable. I would simply tell the truth and let the system do the rest. The online guest security form was simple enough. My parents and Chloe just typed in their names. When it was my turn, I filled in the required fields, Captain Eva Rostova, followed by my service number. It felt strange to type the name that carried so much weight in my real life, a name no one in my family ever used. I thought of them calling me Mouse, and a strange calm settled over me. I wasn't laying a trap. I was just clocking in. I hit submit and knew, with the certainty of a professional analyst, that I had just set a series of unavoidable events into motion. A week before the wedding, my phone rang. It was Michael Thorne, my sister's fiancé. I knew him to be a decent man, a JAG Corps lawyer who, unlike my family, understood that rules and regulations had real-world consequences. His voice was laced with genuine concern. "Eva, it's Michael. I am so sorry to bother you, but my dad's aide just called. There's a flag on your guest pass?" He hesitated, as if trying to understand the words himself. "Something about a special access program clearance requiring command-level verification for entry. Is everything okay?" The gears were turning, exactly as the procedure dictated. I kept my voice even, professional. "It's fine, Michael. Just some government bureaucracy." I paused, then delivered the words I knew would resonate with him. Tell the liaison I'll clear it through my chain of command. The shift on the other end of the line was immediate. He went from concerned fiancé to fellow professional. The terms liaison and chain of command weren't just jargon to him, they were the markers of a world he knew. A world that Chloe's stories about her boring sister and her spreadsheets simply didn't fit into. I RSVP'd yes to my sister's wedding. She thought she was inviting the mouse. But according to the Department of Defense, she had just invited Spectre. And Spectre was bringing her reputation with her. The officers' club ballroom was a world my family had only ever dreamed of. It was all old wood, polished brass, and the weight of history. They moved through it with a kind of desperate glee, basking in the reflected glory of my sister marrying into a military dynasty. My father was telling exaggerated stories to a group of majors, while my mother praised Chloe's impeccable taste to anyone who would listen. Chloe herself was radiant, the undisputed queen of her own universe. A universe in which I was, as always, a glorified servant. "Eva, be a dear and get me another glass of champagne," she shouted, not even looking at me. "The servers are so slow." I murmured a quiet, of course, and retrieved the drink. It didn't bother me. It was the role I was assigned, the part I had always played. Years of practice had taught me to be still, observe, and wait. And so I waited. I watched her give her speech, the one dripping with backhanded compliments about my quiet little life. I saw the condescending chuckles from my family's side of the room, and I saw the polite, confused glances being exchanged among the uniformed guests on the groom's side. They didn't understand the joke because to them disrespect was not a punchline. The speech ended, and a tense, awkward silence hung in the air for a moment. Then a chair scraped against the floor. The sound was loud in the suddenly quiet room. Every head turned. General Thorne was on his feet. He wasn't smiling. His face held an expression of intense focus, a look I'd seen on colonels in mission briefings right before a critical decision. He leaned down and whispered something to his son, Michael. I couldn't hear the words from across the room, but I saw the effect. Michael's face went slack with utter disbelief, his eyes wide as they darted from his father to me. The general straightened up and, without a glance at anyone else, began to walk towards our table. A giddy, expectant energy buzzed through my family. My mother straightened her dress, a proud smile blooming on her face. My father puffed out his chest, clearly assuming the 4-star general was coming, to congratulate him on his fine family, on his magnificent golden child. They thought this moment was about them. It was always about them. They were so busy preparing to receive praise that they didn't notice the general wasn't looking at Chloe. He wasn't even looking at them. His eyes, clear and focused, were locked directly on me. He stopped not at the head of the table but directly in front of my chair. The room was so silent I could hear the faint hum of the chandeliers. He stood at attention, his posture a masterclass in military bearing. Then, with a motion so sharp and precise it cut through the air, he raised his hand in a salute. The sound of his heels clicking together echoed in the stunned silence. His voice was a clear, commanding force, the kind that expected and received absolute obedience. It filled every corner of the ballroom. Captain Rostova, the name, my real name, my rank, hit the air and seemed to hang there, a foreign concept at this table. My parents flinched. My intelligence staff still refer to your analysis during Operation Nightfall as doctrinal. It's an honor to finally meet the architect of that success. He was speaking to me, but his words were for the entire room. On behalf of every soul you brought home, thank you. He named a classified operation. He used my rank. He validated 2 decades of my hidden life in 20 seconds. For a moment, there was nothing. Just a vacuum of pure shock. Then, from the groom's side of the room, one officer began clapping. Not loudly, but with a steady, respectful rhythm. Another joined, then another. It wasn't the wild applause Chloe had received. It was a quiet, profound acknowledgement from those who understood. It was a sign of respect for a fellow professional. I finally took my eyes off the general and looked at my family. My father, a man who had bragged for 30 years about his 2 years in the National Guard, was pale. The color had drained from his face, leaving him looking old and small. My mother's hand was clasped over her mouth, her eyes wide with a terror that came from a worldview being completely shattered. And Chloe? Her face was a grotesque canvas of warring emotions. First, confusion. Then jealous rage. And finally, as the applause continued and she remained utterly ignored, the raw, burning humiliation of being made irrelevant in her own spotlight. She looked at me, truly looked at me for the first time in her life. She wasn't looking at Mouse. She was looking at Captain Rostova. My sister had spent my entire life trying to make me feel small. It only took one salute from a 4-star general to show her how big my shadow really was. After the salute, General Thorne didn't leave me stranded in the wreckage of my family's reality. He gently placed a hand on my elbow, his expression one of quiet understanding, and guided me away from the table. My family remained frozen, a tableau of shock and humiliation. He led me towards a circle of other senior officers, men with eagles and stars, on their shoulders who now looked at me with a new, profound respect. The general's introduction was simple, but it was everything. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice low but clear. "This is Spectre." He didn't need to say anything. My call sign was my entire resume. They nodded, their eyes conveying a message of shared understanding. That was more welcoming than any praise my family had ever given me. From across the room, I watched the final, inevitable collapse. No one approached my family's table. They were suddenly an island, isolated by a truth they could no longer ignore. I saw Michael lean over to Chloe, his face a mask of cold disappointment. I couldn't hear his words, but I could read them on his lips. A question. That was both an accusation and an epitaph for their relationship. "You had no idea, did you? You never even asked." In that moment, the power my family had wielded over me, the power of dismissal, of ridicule, of making me feel small, evaporated completely. Their entire worldview was built on the idea of Chloe's effortless superiority. And a single, undeniable fact had just demolished the whole structure. A year later, the world looked very different. The title of captain had been replaced by a major's oak leaf. My office was in the Pentagon, a place where the weight of responsibility was real and the work mattered. I stood at the head of a briefing room, no longer a quiet mouse in the corner, but a leader. My team, my real family, forged in shared purpose and mutual respect, listened with rapt attention as I detailed the intricacies of a new global threat. They didn't see a boring paper pusher. They saw Major Rostova, an authority in her field. They valued my mind, not my bloodline. In their focused eyes, I found the acceptance I had long stopped looking for at home. One afternoon, an email landed in my inbox. The sender's name was Chloe. I hesitated for a moment, then opened it. It was a long, rambling message filled with self-pity and excuses. The marriage, as I'd suspected, hadn't lasted 6 months. Her influencer career had faltered, the glittering life she'd curated now feeling hollow and desperate. The email was a weak attempt at a non-apology, full of phrases like it was all such a misunderstanding, and ending with the one question that revealed she still didn't get it. "Why didn't you just tell us you were some kind of big shot?" I read the words, and I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just a calm, quiet detachment. The question that would have torn me apart years ago now just seemed pathetic. Her validation was no longer a currency I dealt in. My peace was my own, earned in silence and solitude. Her opinion had no power over it. I moved my cursor over the archive button and clicked without a second thought, turning back to the classified maps spread across my screen. My relationship with General Thorne, however, had deepened into a mentorship. He called me into his office a few weeks after my promotion. It was a corner office with a view of the Washington Monument, filled with a lifetime of service. On his desk, next to a photo of his grandchildren, was a small framed picture from that disastrous wedding. He gestured to it with a sad smile. "That was the day my son saw what true character looks like," he said. "He's better for it, even though it was a hard lesson." He then looked directly at me, his gaze firm and full of respect. "And for what it's worth, the entire command staff is better for having you. My sister believed a legacy was something you married into. I learned a true legacy is something you build in silence and have acknowledged in public. If you've ever had to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it, share your story below. In this community, your expertise is always recognized."